House will come to order. First order of business is roll call. Clerk will mark the machine, and the members will record their presence. Representative Shepard. Representative Gannon. Skog. Clerk will lock the machine and record the roll. 68 present, 2 absent and excused, the majority being present. The House is now ready to do business. The House will now advance to the second order of business, prayer by the Good Chaplain Tom Doherty, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, today provided for us by Emma Whitman from, Minico. Cool. Will our friends in the gallery please arise?
John F. Kennedy said this: "Let us not seek the Republican answer." Oh, it goes beyond that, just a minute. Let us not receive the Republican answer or the Democrat answer, but the right answer. Let us not fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future. And the passage of Scripture is Romans 14. It says, "You then, why do you judge your brother or sister? Or why do you treat them with contempt? For we will all stand before God's judgment seat. It is written, as surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me, every tongue will acknowledge God. So then each of us will give an account of ourselves to God." Let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for this great day to be alive and to serve this great state. Thank you, Lord, for all our leaders, staff, and pages, and I pray you direct each of them. Be with our speaker as he continues to lead. Give him wisdom and understanding. I pray, O Lord, as our leaders work together, that we would never judge one another for the way we think, but to listen carefully and to be open and honest without fearing rejection. May we never be in judgment seat of each other. I'm thankful, Lord, for all the positive people in this room that are a joy to be around. You have blessed us with fine leaders, and may we never take for granted that blessing. Continue to lead these men and women, I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
House will be in order. The House will now advance to third order of business, approval of the journal. The House is at the third order of business.
In the House of Representatives, January 29th, 2024, Mr. Speaker, we, our Committee on Judiciary, Rules, and Administration, report that we have read and approved the House Journal of the 19th Legislative Day and recommend same be adopted as corrected. Moved by Skog, seconded by Gannon.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion passes and the House Journal is approved. The House will now advance to the fourth order of business, consideration of messages from the Governor and the Senate. The House is at the fourth order.
From the Senate, January 26th, 2024. Mr. Speaker, I transmit herewith Senate Bills 1225 and 1236, which have passed the Senate. Novak, Secretary of the Senate.
Senate Bill 1225 and 1236 will be filed for the first reading calendar.
January 26, 2024. Mr. Speaker, I return herewith House Bill 385, which has passed the Senate. Novak, Secretary of the Senate.
House Bill 385 are referred to the Judiciary and Rules and Administration Committee for enrolling. The House will now advance to fifth order of business, report of standing committees. The House at the fifth order of business.
In the House of Representatives, January 29th, 2024. Mr. Speaker, we, our Committee on Judiciary, Rules, and Administration, report that we have printed House Bills 427, 428, 429, 430, 431, 432, 433, and 434. Skog, Chairman.
House Bill 427 referred to the Judiciary and Rules and Administration Committee. House Bills 428, 429, 430, 431, 432, and 433 were referred to the Commerce and Human Resource Committee. House Bills 434 referred to the Resource and Conservation Committee.
January 26, 2024. Mr. Speaker, we, our Committee on Judiciary, Rules, and Administration, return misdirected House Bill 421 to the desk for re-referral. Skog, Chairman.
House Bill 421 will refer to the State Affairs Committee. Without objection, the House will now advance the 8th order of business, first reading and reference of bills and joint resolutions. The House is at the 8th order of business.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 435 by Health and Welfare Committee, an act relating to uniform controlled substances, amending Section 372705 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding Schedule I controlled substances, providing severability and declaring an emergency. House Bill 436 by Health and Welfare Committee, an act relating to health professions, amending Title 54 Idaho Code by the addition of a new Chapter 1 Title 54 Idaho Code to provide a short title to establish provisions regarding the Allied Health Advisory Board and to provide for powers and duties of the Allied Health Advisory Board and the Board of Medicine, amending Section 543502 Idaho Code to define a term and to remove a definition, repealing Section 543504 Idaho Code relating to the Dietetic Licensure Board, repealing Section 543505 Idaho Code relating to the Board of Medicine and Dietetic Licensure Board, amending Chapter 35 Title 54 Idaho Code by the addition of a new Section 543505 Idaho Code to provide for certain fees, amending Section 543506 Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, amending Section 543508 Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, amending Section 543509 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding license expiration and renewal, amending Section 543510 Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, amending Section 543510A Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, amending Section 543902 Idaho Code to define a term, to revise a definition, and to remove a definition, amending Section 543903 Idaho Code to remove a requirement and to revise terminology, amending Section 543906 Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, amending Section 543907 Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, amending Section 543908 Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, amending Section 543909 Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, amending Section 543910 Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, amending Section 543911 Idaho Code to provide for the Allied Health Advisory Board, and to make a technical correction, repealing Section 543912 Idaho Code relating to the Board of Athletic Trainers, repealing Section 543913 Idaho Code relating to powers and duties of the Board of Medicine and Board of Athletic Trainers, repealing Section 543914 Idaho Code relating to compensation of the Board of Athletic Trainers, repealing Section 543915 Idaho Code relating to the Board of Medicine and administrative provisions, amending Chapter 39 Title 54 Idaho Code by the addition of a new Section 543915 Idaho Code to provide for fees, amending Section 544303 Idaho Code to define a term and to remove a definition, repealing Section 544304 Idaho Code relating to the Respiratory Care Licensure Board, repealing Section 544305 Idaho Code relating to the powers and duties of the Board of Medicine and the Respiratory Care Licensure Board, amending Chapter 43 Title 54 Idaho Code by the addition of a new Section 544305 Idaho Code to provide for fees, amending Section 544308 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding requirements for licensure, amending Section 544310 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding licenses and permits, amending Section 545101 Idaho Code to define a term and to remove a definition, amending Section 545102 Idaho Code to remove obsolete language, amending Section 545103 Idaho Code to remove obsolete language, repealing Section 545104 Idaho Code relating to the Naturopathic Medical Board, repealing Section 545105 Idaho Code relating to powers, duties, and funds of the Board of Medicine and Naturopathic Medical Board, amending Chapter 51 Title 54 Idaho Code by the addition of a new Section 545105 Idaho Code to provide for fees, amending Section 545106 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding qualifications for licensure, amending Section 545107 Idaho Code to provide for waivers of certain requirements upon recommendation of the Allied Health Advisory Board and to remove obsolete language, amending Section 545108 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding license expiration and renewal, amending Section 545109 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding discipline or denial of a license, amending Section 545110 Idaho Code to remove obsolete language, providing severability and declaring an emergency and providing an effective date. House Bill 437 by Health and Welfare Committee, an act relating to midwifery, amending Section 541403 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding the composition of the Board of Nursing, amending Title 54 Idaho Code by the addition of a new Chapter 55, Title 54 Idaho Code, to provide legislative intent, to define terms, and to provide for board powers and duties, to provide rulemaking authority, to provide for licensure and penalties, to establish provisions regarding qualifications for licensure, to provide exemptions, to establish provisions regarding fees, to establish provisions regarding client protection and unprofessional conduct, to establish provisions regarding disclosure, record keeping, and license renewal, to provide for immunity from vicarious liability, and to provide severability, and declaring an emergency and providing an effective date. House Bill 438 by Health and Welfare Committee, an act relating to immunizations, amending Section 394802 Idaho Code to require notification of immunization exemptions and declaring an emergency and providing an effective date. House Bill 439 by Health and Welfare Committee, an act relating to Idaho Immunization Assessment Board, amending Section 3, Chapter 32, Laws of 2018 to extend a sunset date and declaring an emergency and providing an effective date.
House Bills 435, 436, 437, 438, and 439 will refer to the Judiciary and Rules and Administration Committee for printing.
From the Senate, Senate Bill 1225 by State Affairs Committee, an act relating to state government, amending Section 672332A Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding interagency contracts with state institutions of higher education and declaring an emergency and providing an effective date. Senate Bill 1236 by State Affairs Committee, an act relating to bingo and raffles, amending Section 677701 Idaho Code to revise terminology and to make a technical correction, amending Section 677702 Idaho Code to revise definitions and to make technical corrections, repealing Section 677703 Idaho Code relating to the establishment of the Bingo Raffle Advisory Board, repealing Section 677704 Idaho Code relating to the members of the Bingo Raffle Advisory Board, repealing Section 677705 Idaho Code relating to meetings of the Bingo Raffle Advisory Board, repealing Section 677706 Idaho Code relating to the powers and duties of the Bingo Raffle Advisory Board, amending Section 677709 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding accounting and use of bingo proceeds and to make technical corrections, amending Section 677710 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding raffles and duck races, amending Section 677711 Idaho Code to revise terminology and to make technical corrections, amending Section 677715 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding vendors and to make technical corrections, amending Section 677716 Idaho Code to revise terminology and to make technical corrections, amending Section 677717 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding manufacturing and distribution requirements, amending Section 677718 Idaho Code to revise terminology and to make technical corrections, amending Section 677719 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding electronic bingo devices and to make technical corrections, and declaring an emergency and providing an effective date.
Senate Bill 1225 will refer to the Commerce and Human Resource Committee. Senate Bill 1236 will refer to the State Affairs Committee. Without objection, the House now advance to 10th order of business. Second reading of bills and joint resolutions. The House is at the 10th order of business.
January 29th, 2024, House Bill 426 by State Affairs Committee regarding Freedom from AI-Rigged Fair Elections Act. House Bill 422 by Education Committee regarding charter schools.
House Bill 426 and House Bill 422 refer to the third reading calendar, were filed for the third reading calendar. Without objection, the House will now advance to the 11th order of business, third reading of bills and joint resolutions. The House is at the 11th order and will have under consideration House Bill 406. The gentleman from 14.
Chairman, request unanimous consent to cease before the reading of 406.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered, and the gentleman will have the floor to present House Bill 406.
406, Uniform Controlled Substance. Everyone has a lot of documentation there on your desk about the scourge that fentanyl is. It's a scourge on America. It's a scourge on our families, our communities, and the state. The DA estimates that this fentanyl is the biggest drug threat this country's ever faced. Year over year, 110,000 people die from overdoses, and 70% of those are from fentanyl. That's 2 Vietnams a year. In Idaho, this death has doubled each year, year over year. Fentanyl deaths have doubled. China is the primary provider of precursors to the cartels, so now we have China and the cartels are in collusion to sabotage our society. Fentanyl is uniquely toxic and dangerous. It is 50,000 times more potent than heroin. 2 milligrams is a lethal dose. 2 milligrams is 5 grains of salt. And these are usually in pill form, and these pills are called usually M30s. They look like Oxycontin and so forth. These pills are out here, so every time someone takes one of these pills, it's literally Russian roulette. The DEA estimates that 70% of these things are potent, 70%. So every time we go out here, every socioeconomic group is at risk at this. So every single group, everybody here has skin in this game. My nephew, not hearing me very well, boss? I got it as close as I can. I'm too tall. I bend over. Yeah. Got the. Ouch. Every socioeconomic group is facing this, so I say everybody has skin in this game. Everyone has skin in this game. My nephew died from an overdose of fentanyl back in 2016, but he was a heroin addict. In Virginia here last summer, they had 7 events within the school, 4 that happened actually on campus, and 3 were recovered with the Narcan. So it's everywhere. Everyone has skin in this game. Also, what's happening in Idaho is changed dramatically. The increase in doses that have been confiscated are up for 2,683%. Also, recently, here, Idaho just crossed the threshold as a new hot spot for overdoses. So this compares to Ada County, compares to Minneapolis, Chicago, and Atlanta. The cartels are here. Purpose of this bill? We want to give law enforcement the tools they need to go after this threat. Deterrence is real. They see this threat. Criminals see this. They discuss it with them. They respond. The cartels, we need to shut down their operations to make it difficult to come here. Now, mandatory minimums are already in place for the other drugs. What this does is closes the gap on these mandatory minimums. And we can make Idaho put the boundaries up. Don't come to Idaho to do drugs. Bottom line, 86% of Idahoans want this. They want something done. They want something done on minimums. 86% want action on this. I'm going to defer to the good gentleman at District 11 to provide the details.
Would the good gentleman yield? Gentleman yields. Continue the debate. Continue the opening, good gentleman.
Ladies and gentlemen, this will be one of the most important bills we vote on this session. As the good gentleman from 14 has described, fentanyl is destroying this country. Idaho has mandatory minimum sentences for all of the illegal drugs except for fentanyl. We need to fix that. We have always taken a tough stance on crime. We have always put down the law that drug dealers will not ruin our communities, they will not kill our families. And we have heard argument that Idaho's tough drug laws do not work. I beg to differ. Look at any of our neighboring states and see how successful soft drug laws are. Idaho is routinely listed as one of the safest states to live in the country, and that is because Idaho is doing it right. Our sheriffs, our chiefs of police, our working men and women in uniform, and our prosecuting attorneys have unanimously come out in support of this bill. This is what needs to happen. Our citizens strongly support tough legislation against drugs and the enforcement of that legislation. And I believe we need to listen. I ask for your green light on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. You've heard the motion. Is there further debate on the motion? Gentleman from 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman like to debate the bill?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
If I can keep my mic up. It's not used to being used. Mr. Speaker, 20 years of practice law, and I was so frustrated with the discretion of some of the decisions that these judges have made. Sometimes I disagree with the decisions of judges, thinking that they have abused their discretion. But I still have to give the judges the opportunity to make a determination for themselves. If we're going to set mandatory minimums for everything, we don't need judges because we don't need discretion. We don't need the judge to hear the evidence, see the circumstances, and then make a determination that is just. So I'm not going to be able to support this bill because I still believe that an individual sitting at that bench making a determination as to the circumstances should have the discretion to make a determination as to what that sentence should be. There's no question. The drugs nationwide are destroying the culture. It's one of many facets that are destroying our culture. But we must remain a people where the judges have the discretion to make a determination from the facts and the law before them. So I won't be supporting this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, good gentlemen. Is there further debate on the motion? Gentleman from 5. Your mic works.
It does, and it's hot, too. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Debate against the bill.
Gentleman has the floor to debate.
Many people in this body actually served with a dear friend of mine, Representative Remington. For those of you who don't know, he's a pastor up in North Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, actually at the church I attend. And he's the guy that was shot 6 times when he was leaving the church service some years ago with a .45 hollow point. He survived. He's alive and well, and well, with exceptions. I mean, he's still carrying some lead. But the reality is he's started a program 20 years ago in North Idaho, and it's the Good Samaritan Rehabilitation Program. And what they did at the time he started, he was told that he couldn't do that, but they started a program, and they take in people basically to rehab from drug and alcohol abuse and a few other things as well. But they've been incredibly successful. They just graduated their 4,000th person from that program, and they have a 76% rate of success with these people. These are numbers that any rehabilitation program would die for, to be perfectly honest. It's incredible what they've done. And so he's come out against this. He said, and while they believe that drugs are bad and a lot of people die from drugs, he said the standards on this particular piece of legislation, he said that people that are addicted to drugs, they need to take more and more. And so a person who is addicted could be caught with quite a bit. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're peddling the drugs. It just means that they're a serious addict. And to take away the discretion of the judges, in his opinion, would be detrimental to the whole process. He figured they've saved the state about $7 million for the rehabilitation they've done, the people that they've taken out of the prison system. The way it works up there is 20 years ago when he started this program, they said he can't do it. Well, he did, and now he has a relationship with the courts. And some weeks he spends up to 5 days in the court system, actually going through the courts. And he watches this happen, and they've been able to get people, the judges, to release people into their program, and it's been successful. So his concern is that you're going to send people to prison that perhaps didn't need to go there, that you might have been able to rehabilitate, which is a plus for everybody because it saves the state money, and it makes people basically productive members of society again. He's had a couple statistics here. He said 90% of addicts come from divorced homes and highly dysfunctional parents. 85% of male addicts were given alcohol by their parents. 60% of their clients have parents that are drug addicts. This means they've been taught this lifestyle, and in order to change this, they needed someone else to intervene, and so that's what their program does. It's been successful. Fentanyl is a tremendous problem. I actually made the point at a couple of meetings we had in Kootenai County that I wouldn't mind seeing fentanyl declared a weapon of mass destruction. And if you look at it, you find somebody with a suitcase nuke or something, they throw the book at him, and he might be capable of killing maybe 1,000 people, who knows. Routinely, you hear people caught all the time that are caught with a briefcase or something that has enough fentanyl to kill the entire state of Washington. That is a weapon of mass destruction. And the fact is that the drugs are made to look like other drugs that we're familiar with. So these are counterfeits. This is to look like something. So this is actually something designed to kill people. the bigger problem, obviously, with the southern border, which we can't deal with necessarily, but there are issues. I just would like everybody to know I just can't support this, and I'm sure it's going to pass, but I'm not sure it's the right answer. Thank you.
Thank you, good gentlemen. Is there further debate on the motion? Good lady from 2. Used to be 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good gentleman from 14 yield to a question?
Gentleman 14 yield the question.
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. I have a question about the new section. It'd be page 2, line 34, where it's the drug-induced homicide. And I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. I think I do, but I'm not positive. So it says in there, if the person has violated the provisions of this section, or this section, and provided the controlled substance to a person, one of those sections is 372732. That basically just says it's unlawful for any person to manufacture or deliver. And so I'll explain what my concern is, and then maybe you can explain if this would apply. So if you have a child that's given a drug in school, some pills, and maybe they take the pills, they're not ingesting them, but they take them because they feel peer pressure. And then that child, because they've been taught better, maybe just gives them away to someone else. And that child dies, their classmate dies. Is that child going to get a life sentence for what I see as drug-induced homicide? Even though they haven't manufactured, they haven't trafficked. That's how I read that, and I'm just unclear on that section.
Gentleman 14.
Well, that is not the way this is going to happen. The burden of proof to make this happen is very clear. I just talked to my contact in L.A., and he is the sheriff. He's in charge of the Drug Enforcement Division down there in L.A. County. They say they have 4 to 6 drug-induced homicide cases a week. The last week they had one case, 4 people died. They were able to track it through text messages, track it through what they saw in videos, and what the Venmo exchange of money. They're going after, you go after the dealers. You can't track this down by Billy said this, or you'd never be able to prove that anyway, and that's not the intent. The intent is to go after the pathway to the dealers that are doing this killing. And they have it in LA every day, 4 to 6 cases every week. And they pick the ones they can, and they go after it. If they have problems, because LA is a slippery slope, they don't enforce much of anything down there. The cops are so frustrated. And if they have a good case, they turn it to the DEA, and the DEA goes in there and rips their lips off. 20 years they have, and they have a very fine requirement to have burden of proof. It's very precise. They're not going to go after kids. They'll never be able to prove that. That'll never be prosecuted. That will never happen.
Lady from 2.
Quick follow-up, please.
Would the gentleman yield for a follow-up question?
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. So the word I'm concerned about is deliver. It seems like which child would be the person that delivered? Would it be the drug dealer that gives to the first kid, or would it be the child that gives it to the person that dies? The deliver is pretty vague, and so I'm just concerned. Who would that go to?
Gentleman from 14.
Well, I would say, good gentleman, good lady from
2.
Clearly, they're going after that dealer. The dealer as such, because that's the intent, and that's discretion also. Law enforcement and prosecutors, they're never going to go after something like that, and they won't be able to prove it. Billy gave it to Joey. Who said what? They go after cases they can prove, and they go after the electronic, and this is how they're so successful. The only way they can really prove this, in the past it was very difficult, because they have an electronic pathway all the way across, videos of them actually exchanging. And that's the level it requires to get it across the line and go after it. And they go after the dealers. They're never going to go after these cases. That's never going to be the intent, and that will never happen.
Thank you.
Further debate on the motion? Gentleman 26.
To debate, please.
Gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, sir. I can't disagree with any of the arguments that have come before us. I would suggest possibly the flexibility to the minimum sentences be addressed separately. To put fentanyl up on the same level, at least on the same level with heroin, I couldn't be happier to vote for this. And the other safety valve I don't think we've talked about in this are our locally elected prosecuting attorneys. Just because there's a minimum sentence that the judiciary is held to, which we could address later, there's also the discretion of the prosecutor of what they want to file, what they want to plea bargain, and discretion, frankly, in the process. So until we address minimum sentences across the board, I like this to at least give fentanyl equal footing with heroin.
Further debate on the motion. Could lady from 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate against the bill.
Lady has the floor. Debate against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, body. As some of you may know, I know we have a lot of new folks, but this has been a passion area. I have been working on mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenses for about 7 years. I have spent thousands of hours talking to judges, attorneys, police, those who have been incarcerated. I have cried with the mothers and grandmothers of those locked up. And I have read a stack of transcripts about this high from sentencing hearings, from judges who are staying from the bench. It is horrible I have to give you this sentence. It is breaking my heart. I think it is a huge mistake to send you away to prison. I wish I could send you to rehab or on probation, but the legislature has tied my hands. So yes, we do have these laws on the books for other drugs. I would not say they're a great success. I think they need fixing badly, and I don't know that the answer is to conform to a broken system and break the system across all drugs. I would rather see us fix what's there. And I have come to believe that mandatory minimum sentences are the greatest source of injustice in our criminal laws right now. But I do certainly agree very strongly that we have to do something about fentanyl. And I believe, and I'm confident everybody in this room is on the same page on that. Fentanyl is an absolute deadly scourge. I have 2 friends who have lost loved ones to fentanyl overdoses in the past 6 months. It is a catastrophe. But because it is such a catastrophe, I think we need to address it in a real way that will genuinely solve the problem. And I don't believe that this bill is that answer. And I take strong issue with the narrative that if you don't vote for this bill, then you're siding with the drug cartels or you don't support the police. I very much support the police. I very much support strong action to address fentanyl, but I oppose this bill. First of all, judges in Idaho are not soft on crime, and they are not soft on fentanyl. They have everything they need right now to lock up the bad guys, often for much longer sentences than we see in this bill. And judges, when they're presented with a true bad guy, they don't back down. They lock those guys up for a long time. They hear the cases. They know what's what, and I'm going to give you examples of some of the recent sentences just within the past year. In Bonner County, 12 years for a person for possession of fentanyl with intent to distribute. A Boise man got 20 years fixed with a possibility of life in prison for manufacturing and distributing fentanyl. There was a case in Bannock County where it was a controlled buy with an informant of 100 pills that had fentanyl in them. The prosecutors recommended 4 to 8 years. The judge gave him 18 years in prison. So judges are cracking down hard, and sentences in Idaho actually tend to be much higher than for comparable offenses in other states. We have very tough judges who are very tough on crime. They are very capable of knowing a bad guy and handing out a really serious sentence. The only thing that this bill does is force that judge to lock up a person that they don't think should be locked up. They can lock up the bad guys till they're blue in the face. Literally, that is all this bill does, is in those rare cases where it's not a really bad guy. Maybe it's a first-time offender. Maybe it's an 18-year-old. Maybe it's a user rather than a dealer. And the judge feels in their heart, you know, this person might be better served with some probation and some rehab time than forcing them into prison, where in all likelihood they will turn into a criminal, where the only people they will be hanging out with for 3 or 6 years will be criminals. All this bill does is strip out that power in those rare cases where a judge actually thinks it's inappropriate to give prison time. And I think that's a big move in the wrong direction that will actually exacerbate our crime problem. Now, you know, this, and again, it does worsen crime, and there's a lot of evidence to that effect. In states that have eliminated mandatory minimums, they've actually seen their crime rates go down. But there's a lot of things. This bill has been sold as deterrence, that we need this for deterrence. Well, first of all, I would say our justice system is supposed to accomplish a lot more than deterrence. Deterrence is a very important piece, but there's also supposed to be justice, retribution, rehabilitation, fairness, proportionality, cost effectiveness. All of those other things are going on the funeral pyre in the name of deterrence. In fact, justice is one of the biggest things to fall. Again, judges are forced to do things they don't think are just. I've heard from defense attorneys who say they have clients they believe are innocent, but they don't even dare try to make the case when there's a mandatory minimum on the table. They advise their clients who are innocent to plead guilty to try to get the prosecutor to drop the charge. That is not justice. But is it deterrence? Because that's what we're being told. We got to do this for deterrence. Well, if you look at this sheet that I've handed out, these are the 13 states in America that already have mandatory minimums for fentanyl offenses. And Idaho's current rate of synthetic opioid deaths, that's fentanyl deaths, is actually lower than all but one of the states that have mandatory minimums for fentanyl. In fact, the states that have mandatory minimums for fentanyl, 10 of the 13, have opioid deaths, have fentanyl deaths that are higher than the national average. Idaho put in these mandatory minimums for other drug offenses in 1992. Since then, we've seen our drug offense rate go up 700%. There is simply no data case to be made for the proposition that there is any deterrence value here whatsoever. Now, there are things that do deter. There are studies that show if you really want deterrence, it's actually the certainty of getting caught that deters, rather than the length of the sentence. If we want to deter, we should put more cops on the street. Make people know that you will get caught. That's the way to deter. It has nothing to do with sentence lengths or mandatory sentences at all. And again, you will not find data points that I've ever come across in 7 years of studying that shows any deterrence value of doing this. It might make us feel good and feel like we're doing something, but it doesn't. Now, I believe the seriousness of this crisis demands action that will actually work, not something that might arguably make matters worse and take somebody who could be rehabilitated and turn them into a criminal. What are some of the things that would actually work? There's a lot of them. We need a scaled-up education campaign. I'm going to date myself. I grew up in the 80s. I grew up with those frying pans with eggs. This is your brain on drugs. There was a really robust education campaign. It scared the bejesus out of me. I would never touch that stuff. We need everybody to understand how deadly this stuff is so they don't get near it. We need to legalize testing materials. Right now, Idaho is one of only, I think, 6 or 7 states in America, probably none by the end of this session, that bans fentanyl testing strips. So if a person wants to avoid getting tested or avoid fentanyl, they can't. We need to make that legal so that people can avoid getting poisoned by fentanyl if they want to. Again, we need to get more law enforcement out there, increase the certainty of getting caught. We need treatment for addiction. So many of these people, when you're in the throes of addiction, it is a violent urge. They don't care what the laws are. They're not reading the laws. They have a physiological impulse. They are a slave to their addiction, and there isn't a law you can put on the books that's going to stop them from seeking out fentanyl. We need to treat that addiction and shut down that market with more robust rehab and treatment options. And that will starve the market here. So there's a lot of things we can do that would be genuinely effective in confronting what is a very serious crisis. But this bill is not it. This bill demands incarceration without making any distinction between dealers and users, without making any distinction between first-time people who made a mistake and serious bad guys. It doesn't even really require knowledge. It requires that you have knowledge that you possess something, but you could think you possess something else and not even know it's been laced with fentanyl, and you would still get caught up in this mandatory minimum. Again, I really take strong issue. I am not soft on crime. I am not soft on fentanyl, and I support the police. But I want to see us do things that actually work, and I think this bill reeks injustice without any genuine benefit to shutting down our fentanyl crisis. So I hope you'll give this your red light.
Thank you, lady. Is there further debate on the motion? The lady from 9.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from 14 answer a couple questions?
Gentleman 14 yield?
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentleman. Do you have an estimate of how many more users, dealers will be caught up, arrested, and imprisoned with this bill?
Gentleman 14.
I do not have data on that. I do not.
Good lady from 9.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman, so it would be more
Did
than
the good
one
gentleman
vote.
yield to another question?
Yes.
Gentleman yields. Good lady from 9.
Thank you. Excuse me. Mr. Speaker and good gentleman, it certainly would be more than one.
Gentleman 14.
I would think so initially, and I would suggest that initially there might be a few and several until everyone gets the word out and then it stops. That's the whole idea of deterrence. When the word gets out, and I picked this from every law enforcement I've talked to, from everywhere, I've been from DEA to LA to here, to DA here. When they hear about this, they get scared and they don't do it. They don't want to come to Idaho. The word is, don't come to Idaho to do drugs. Don't come to Idaho to do heroin, meth right now, because these mandatory minimums. They go someplace else. And this, we put a wall around Idaho. Don't come here, and that's the word. And it is a real thing. When I talk to the people in LA, they're so frustrated. They can't do anything from LA County because of Gascon. Then they turn it to DEA, and then they got game. And it shuts it down. It shuts it down. And it works. And so that is initially when the word gets out, then they stop. They go someplace else. Cartels go to where it's easy business. That's how it will go.
Good lady from 9.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentlemen.
Gentleman yields to another question.
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. I was just looking at the fiscal note, and it says there's no additional expenditures. Even if you have one case in each county, the local government is going to pay for that, and that's not mentioned in the fiscal note. But my other question is, do you consider this bill to be an emergency?
Gentleman 14.
Well, an emergency, since I look at the data and how it surged in this state and the cartels are poised to make action here, yes. And fentanyl is different. It's not like you can't rehabilitate dead. People are dying on this. So it's a different threat. It's this poison, this toxin that's getting into these schools. That's the fear of completely innocent people are being affected by this. Yeah, it's an emergency. I'd go with that.
Good lady from 9.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just a statement, perhaps we should change then the effective date, because this is a July 1st effective date. If we are in a true emergency, we should have this upon passage and approval. Thank you.
Thank you, good ladies. Further debate on the motion. Gentleman 25.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to make a comment on the emergency. I believe that
The gentleman has the floor to
I believe that LSO is including that emergency date on all bills now because of the situation we ran into a couple of years ago when we had the lengthy session that went beyond July 1st. And I could be wrong, but I believe they're still continuing to put in the emergency clause as July 1st. That's what I understood.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further debate on the motion. Gentleman from 5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and esteemed colleagues.
Would the gentleman like to debate the bill?
I would like to debate against the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
First of all, we all know that this is a nonpartisan bill. Republicans, Democrats, independents can all agree that fentanyl is the worst drug scourge we've seen in our history. No one is in favor of fentanyl. However, this bill's intent is to separate the casual user or the addicted user from the dealer. Now, let's analyze the intent versus what is actually being delivered by this bill. We've seen the poll results that said, as the good gentleman from District 14, 86% of the public want something done about mandatory minimums. The worse the disaster, the more hue and cry there is to try and get this thing fixed. Let's examine whether or not we're fixing this problem. And I happen to agree 100% with the good lady from District 18, excuse me. One of the principles of punishment is that the punishment must fit the crime. So we have to separate those that are truly guilty, the drug dealers, the pushers, the manufacturers, the distributors, from those who just get caught up in this. And by this I mean we've also created, through our medical system, a dependence on opioids. If you look at the case of Rush Limbaugh, and I'm not looking at him from a political standpoint, but he's well known, he had back surgery and intense pain that caused him to do doctor shopping, where he got 2,000 OxyContin pills in a 6-month period. That's 10 pills a day to try and relieve his pain. Now, he did go into rehabilitation, which is what we really need to do, and he was not charged with possession or drug dealing, but the opioid situation has created an involuntary class of users that have to get this medication, and they're shut off by their doctors. So that's a separate issue that we have to work on here in the legislature as well. We all agree that the sentence for someone grabbing someone's arm, which is a form of battery, versus killing somebody brutally should have 2 different sets of punishment. So there's a range of punishment that fit the crime. I sat through 3 hours of public hearings and 2 hours of committee debate last week and the week before. And the one question that was repeatedly asked and never answered was, how much fentanyl are we actually looking at to get us into that first class of offending dealers or users? It was never answered. Well, I have some of the answers. First of all, the National Institutes of Health have indicated that the least detectable amount of fentanyl that can be detected with a lab test or any other test is 0.1 micrograms. Now, all of us who have paid attention in physics and chemistry, and I'm an engineer 2 classes short of a minor in chemistry, understand what milligrams, micrograms, nanograms, and grams are. But I think we need a little bit of clarification to all of us who are going to vote on this bill as to exactly what we're talking about. I have some props on my desk, which I'm not allowed to use. A sugar cube weighs 3.6 grams, okay? 4 cubes is 14.4 grams. That is the highest range of the powder or bulk substance that is talked about in this bill for the lowest category of offense. So 4 to 14 grams for bulk usage, powder or compressed, or between 100 and 250 pills. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Now, with the aforementioned minimum detectable amount of fentanyl, if a casual user has 100 pills and you use the test that the NIH says is a detectable amount, he can have 0.85 grams of fentanyl, which if he were to ingest 235 of those pills, he would have a fatal dose. So he could ingest almost the entire amount of the 100 to 250 range and not receive a lethal dose with the least detectable amount. Conversely, the drug dealer who is allowed to have 4 grams to 14 grams, think of 14 grams of pure fentanyl, which we have been told by some of the testifiers is now coming into the states so that the drug dealers can manufacture pills because they have the raw materials. 14 grams is 14,000 milligrams. Okay, there's 1,000 milligrams per gram. That is 7,000 lethal doses. Okay, so we compare the worst condition, 7,000 lethal doses, to the casual drug user with 100 pills with the least detectable amount of 0.85. There's a 16,000 to 1 ratio in that one category alone. 16,000. Now, are you trying to tell me with the content of this bill, with that unspecified amount of, quote, the least detectable amount of fentanyl, that we should allow a 16,000 range of fentanyl in the product? It's like saying we're going to give the same sentence to someone who steals $100 versus someone who steals $1.6 million. That's the $16,000 or 16,000 ratio difference between the minimum and the maximum in that first category. I'm not even going to talk about the second categories. Now let's talk about the deadliness of pills or fentanyl or drugs in general. I have on my desk, unfortunately I can't show it to you, it's a prop, a bottle of aspirin. The lethal dose of aspirin for a 150-pound person is 105 pills. So some of our more delicate representatives, no names intended, if they ingested that full bottle of pills, would receive a lethal dose of aspirin, readily available over the counter in any grocery store, any dollar store, any drugstore, commonly available. Now, that minimum amount of fentanyl in the 100 pills that this casual user or addicted person who's coming off of opioids and needs this from the street drugs, he would have to take 235 pills for a fatal dose. So that aspirin, readily available anywhere, is twice as deadly as the least amount detectable pills that will get somebody a 3-year prison sentence. This, to me, is absolutely unacceptable. Now, like I said, nowhere in the bill do we actually talk about the quantity available. It's only the detection technique, which can change with time as well. We might see better ability to detect fentanyl in the future with advanced laboratory techniques that we may not have right now. Without that being specified, it's like saying the speed limit is undetermined because we don't know how to measure it right now with any kind of accuracy. So I'd like to digress a little bit and say that one of the corporal works of mercy is to feed the poor and to visit those in prison, hopefully to bring the word of Christ to them. We should do better and prevent, many of us, most of us have never been able to do that. Some in ministry have, but I'd say let's do one better. Let's prevent some of these people that are going to get caught up in this from going to prison in the first place. All they're going to do in prison is get the $100,000 pass or coursework in criminology, and I don't mean criminal justice. They're going to be trained by the best criminals that money can buy. I realize that this is a emotionally and physically and politically charged issue, and the big elephant in the room is, what am I going to do to tell my constituents that if I vote against this bill, what is the press going to do to crucify us, and what are our constituents going to do, or our political opponents? I know that's weighing heavily on a lot of our minds. I'd like to quote C.S. Lewis. He says, "If you look for truth, you may find comfort in the end. If you look for comfort, you will not get either comfort or truth." When we vote on this bill, I'd like to suggest a unique difference from the way we voted in the past, and it's all legal. I'd like to see a two-part vote. First, vote with your minds, independent of the political impact. I want to see a lot of reds up there, and if we don't have enough reds, to send the bill back for reconsideration and correction of some of these horribly serious problems, then I would certainly understand you changing your vote from red to a green to report to the press or to your constituents the way you want to vote. But let's bear in mind, I don't want to make my decision politically on the backs of innocent kids going to jail. Thank you.
Thank you, good gentlemen. Is further debate on the motion? Gentleman 28.
Thank you, Speaker. To debate in favor of the bill.
Gentleman has the floor to debate bill.
Thank you, Speaker. Let's talk about a little bit of truth. In our testimony in our committee, we heard that 6 out of 10 pills coming across the border have a lethal dose of fentanyl in them. 6 out of 10. Then the 2023 stats came out and they said they're finding it to be closer to 7. That was the next stat we heard, 7 out of 10. So if you take a revolver and fill 3 of those chambers and hand it to somebody, that's what's going to happen to the people that get these pills into their hands. To sit around and say that we can have the luxury to sit here and not do anything about fentanyl is not true. We've already waited a year and lost Idahoans to this deadly drug. We need to act today. It may not be perfect, it may need some tweaking, but most bills that come through this body get tweaked and changed after they get passed. I urge you for a green light today to help protect Idaho's future. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there further debate on the motion? Gentleman 15.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate.
Gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you. Addiction is immune to deterrence. And I don't doubt the good gentleman from 14's sincere and passionate concern about this very real issue, that something needs to be done. But I do believe that this piece of legislation does need to make a better distinction between manufacturers, dealers, traffickers, and users, as well as more of a distinction between adults and minors. We have an opportunity to make this right now instead of hoping that it gets tweaked later. And so I would hope that we have the time to do it, and I hope we would consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, good gentlemen. Is further debate on the motion? Gentleman 30.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate the bill.
Gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you. Good ladies and good gentlemen, I'm here to debate the bill. I am torn. I agree with, on the one hand, the fact that fentanyl is a scourge. We've heard a lot of testimony in the committee that vetted this bill, indicating the magnitude of the scourge that it represents. And like most or all of you all, I want to do something about that scourge. I also believe that this bill is flawed, and flawed in some fairly significant ways. And we've heard a number of people who have debated today and pointed out some of those flaws. I'm not going to, I'll mention those, but I'll pass over them fairly quickly and get to a couple of things that I think are haven't been touched on, and maybe that I can lend some perspective to. I say that because, one, back in 1995, I graduated from law school and went to work as a deputy prosecuting attorney, actually, and have been working as a lawyer in either prosecution or criminal defense ever since. And so I feel like I have some insight to share. I kind of tangentially, a few years ago, I read Team of Rivals, and that book impressed a lesson upon me, which is I feel like when somebody has something to share, they need to share it, and it's a better product is going to result if there are a lot of viewpoints brought to the table and expressed, and then a solution is found, as opposed to trying to surround yourselves with an echo chamber of people that see things the way you see things, and coming up with the solution in that fashion. There's a part of me that says I wish that the bill that is before us had taken more of a Team of Rivals approach than I fear it has taken. And so, in any event, I think that the perspective that I bring is important, at least in regard to, sharing some of these concerns. Some of the things that have been mentioned that I'll skip over are the fiscal note and the fact that this will cost Idaho taxpayers money. I think that the good gentleman from 2 mentioned the balance of power thing and the taking away of discretion from our judges, which is a concern to me as well. Section 3 of this bill, which is the death by dealer section, is of concern to me, and that's already been discussed as well. I want to talk about a couple things. One, I'm concerned that this bill casts too wide of a net and will catch up in this net both users that aren't dealers and some folks that are just innocent altogether. And that is deeply concerning to me. Let me talk about some of the specifics here. The reason that this is a problem is fairly nuanced because it's a combination of things that work together to create a problem here. One, this bill indicates that it's targeting fentanyl traffickers. However, it does not require any showing of intent to distribute or to traffic. Rather, that intent is statutorily mandated, if this bill becomes law, by the amount of fentanyl in question. So the second factor is, let's look at the amount in question. And to trigger the mandatory minimum at the lowest level, that amount is 4 grams. The second concern that kind of works together with that first one is that that isn't 4 grams of the drug, it's 4 grams of any mixture that contains a detectable amount of fentanyl. So, and we heard testimony in committee to the effect that fentanyl is cut into all sorts of things. It's cut into other drugs, but it's also cut into substances that aren't in and of themselves illegal at all. We heard that fentanyl can be cut into, or that other substances such as marijuana can be laced with fentanyl and that kind of thing. So again, the concern is illustrated, probably as well as anything, by the reality that while this bill is targeting fentanyl traffickers, by the black letter reading of this bill, a person who possessed 4 grams of marijuana, which was laced with any detectable amount of fentanyl, by definition is treated as a fentanyl trafficker. Now, whether we are gung-ho about making a statement about fentanyl and coming out tough on crime and so forth, I think that everyone has to agree that that reality, that people who have a 4 gram, and by the way, 4 grams for reference is about the weight of 4 paper clips. It's certainly a user amount if we're talking about marijuana. Somebody that possesses that with a detectable amount of fentanyl and with no requirement of showing that the person has the intent to deliver or to distribute or to traffic, I mean, I hope we can all agree that that is potentially a problem. We in committee, we talked about that problem extensively, and I heard more times than I can count that the answer to a concern that we brought up was, quote unquote, prosecutorial discretion, or the discretion of sheriffs and sheriff's deputies and so forth. And it might be from, several years of being a defense attorney, but I am not persuaded that good policy comes from passing bad laws and then relying on discretion. It's very important that we pass good laws that don't have flaws in them, rather than passing a law to which we need to say time and time again, that will never happen because the good men and women of blue won't let it happen, or our prosecutors won't let it happen. Even if we were to agree that every law enforcement officer in the state was well-intentioned and had good motives, even if we were to agree that every prosecutor in the state could set aside aspirations and political motivations and so forth, who's to say that that's going to be the same picture 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or whatever? It wasn't long ago that we were very anxiously engaged as a body in addressing balance of power issues with emergency powers of the executive branch. And I remember thinking, even if we think the gentleman on the second floor is doing everything right, it's important to balance these powers in a way that the next guy or the next gal doesn't have the ability to abuse his or her discretion. That is important to me. Two more things. One, before I went to law school, I graduated with an economics degree, and over the course of last session and this session, in committee and in talking with people who are in support of this bill, my my most often asked question, I think, related to the effect, how effective this was. I wanted statistics. I didn't want the answer that we always get comparing us to Oregon and Washington and California, because their policies across the board are fundamentally different than the state of Idaho. But there are states out there that have tough on crime stances without adopting this kind of legislation. And I wanted data on how Idaho's statistics compare with those other conservative states that have tough on crime policies but haven't gone to mandatory minimums, or if they have gone to mandatory minimums, have some of these tweaks in it that I think would make this a better law. And I felt like that was woefully lacking. I do think that from a economic standpoint, that it's clear that we're dealing with a substance, and even those that are in favor of the bill in committee, that testified in favor of the bill in committee, acknowledge that we're dealing with a substance that is what in economics we call price inelastic. And what that means basically is, if you attack the supply side of this drug, then what happens is, if you get some of the drug off the street or whatever, then the price goes up, but it doesn't affect the demand. And when the price goes up, it influences other people to get in and fill the void that was created with new product, new dealers, new fentanyl in this case. And so what you have is a very close to the same amount of quantity that is in the state and is consumed, but it's at a higher price. And I don't think I do think that there is some merit to this idea of deterrent and sending a strong message. And again, in all my debates and in making these points about the flaws in this bill, I still think there's merit to the concept of attacking fentanyl. I just think we need to have a discussion about all these finer points and whether this is the right approach or whether it can be improved. And, you know, if it's not a perfect bill, then we all need to make a decision on our own about, you know, is it good enough that balancing the good and the bad, that it deserves our green light. I'm still kind of on the fence on that myself. But in conclusion, I want to raise one other point, and this is kind of I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to these things. I think a lot of you guys are too, to be honest. But several years ago, when I was doing some volunteer work for the Blackfoot High School We the People team, I was mentoring the Unit 5 team or group that worked on the Bill of Rights. And in that process, I read a book called The Bill of Rights Primer. And the author of that book is a constitutional law scholar named Akil Reed-Amar. And I learned a lot of things, and one of the things I learned is that the right to trial by jury, which is kind of this venerated right that we enjoy in the United States of America and have since the early days of our country, initially was, yes, a protection against a protection for the accused against being improperly convicted and so forth, but also that it was meant to be a right of the people at large to have a say in the criminal justice system and to act as the final check and balance in a system that involves every one of the branches of government. We have, of course, the legislature that makes the laws. We have the executive branch, our police force and prosecutors who enforce the laws. We have our judges who rule on constitutionality of the laws, and also, unless we take this away from them, are acting as the people that sentence in a criminal justice case. But the founders wanted the people to have the right to be there and to act as the final check and the final balance in this process. Now, the right of trial by jury has been kind of undermined slowly but surely ever since. When the country was formed and when the Bill of Rights was adopted, there really was no such thing as plea bargaining. That came about decades later. So from a place where every case went to trial to where we are now, where probably about 2% of cases, if that, go to trial, that right to trial by jury as it relates to the people has been kind of hollowed out or taken away. This would further weaken that, and I think that we ought to just know what the effect of this bill would be if it became law. It would further weaken that by doing this. In these drug cases, the element that is the most important is going to always be, not always, but a high percentage of the time be, what was their intent? What was their mens rea? Did they have that criminal intent? What this law does is it says, we don't want the jury to decide if the person had the requisite amount of criminal intent. All we need to do is say, was there a mixture that had a detectable amount of fentanyl in it? And if so, we are going to tell the jury the intent element is met. You don't get to weigh in on that. And that's a concern to me because, again, I think that we are oftentimes, and it's worse when there's a compelling reason to act and to act quickly, when there's an emergency, when there's a scourge, we like to get things done and we don't always slow down and say, what is the effect of this on our fundamental rights, this fundamental right of freedom, this fundamental right of due process? What are we actually doing here? I mentioned earlier, this is going to sweep up in the net some people that aren't guilty at all. And the way it does that is because along with these other two things that I've talked about, the weight and the mixture language, in practice, what you have are other gray areas, and I'll throw one out there. I'll throw a couple of examples out there. In response to the idea that prosecutors are never going to charge this in the wrong way, I will say that I'm personally aware of a case in Custer County where a mandatory minimum methamphetamine charge was made on somebody who allegedly had a user amount of methamphetamine. When his house was raided, he tried to dispose of that in a bathtub full of water, and the case was charged as the mixture of the bathtub full of water, which I don't know if, I'm not very good at math, but that's probably like 500 pounds of a mixture containing methamphetamine. That's being charged. Now, he wasn't convicted. He didn't go serve a mandatory minimum sentence, but that gets charged, and then when it gets charged, immediately there's a plea offer made that says, hey, just plead guilty to the possession of meth, and we won't, we'll drop the reference to this guy being a trafficker. And maybe that's a great result. I mean, I don't know. That's something that we need to weigh as a body, is that kind of sledgehammer okay with us? I'm personally familiar with cases under the mandatory minimum laws for marijuana trafficking where marijuana is baked into a sheet of brownies or something like that, and it's charged as a trafficking case because a sheet of brownies weighs more than a pound. Again, that follows up with an offer, a plea offer. Hey, we'll drop the trafficking charge. Everybody knows he's not a trafficker. Just plead guilty to the possession of marijuana and we'll be done with this. Where innocent people get caught up is when you also look at constructive possession cases. And that's where, say, a passenger or the driver in a vehicle is part of a drug bust and drugs are found in the vehicle. And I can assure you that if this bill becomes law, that there will be people who were in a vehicle and had no knowledge of any contraband being in there, but who get charged with a trafficking amount of fentanyl and who basically have to make the decision, do I go to trial and try to prove my innocence, knowing that the stakes are a mandatory amount of time in prison, or do I plead guilty to a crime I did not commit? These are weighty, weighty issues. I don't know where I am on this, but I do know that it's important that we have the discussion rather than rush to judgment on a bill that I think could be improved by a couple of fairly minor tweaks, minor in that they wouldn't affect the deterrent, in my opinion, of this bill, and they would greatly enhance the protections that otherwise we're giving away. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further debate on the bill, on the motion. Good lady from 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of privilege.
Lady has the floor.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, I don't want to quash the debate at all. That's not why I'm here. But if we start repeating ourselves, I'd remind everyone that all of those FFA kids are waiting for us for lunch.
Further debate on the bill. Good gentleman from 10. Gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
In favor? And thank you, good lady from 8. That's a good incentive to go quickly. I've lost a lot of sleep over this bill. It didn't come about fast. We went through this last year in our committee. Middle of the summer, I'd wake up 3 in the morning and tell my wife, I'm thinking about that stupid fentanyl because of the victims that were going on last year. Still people dying, families being victimized. And so here we are. Our committee, Judiciary and Rules, worked hard on this bill. Every member struggled to make sure they had the right decision. It was brought to the floor at 16-2, and it was not an easy decision by any member of my committee, and I respect every one of them who spoke, including my good friend from District 30, who brought up good points, but this was not a rush in any way. So, for many years, I just reiterate, this Idaho code has been in place for meth and other drugs. So this is just a true-up to cocaine and meth and heroin. It's the same bill. It's been found constitutionally sound in our state for many years. If it wasn't constitutionally sound, I personally would not bring it. It's a true-up bill, which I like to do, make it all equal. I do support help for those who are addicted to drugs. I do support that kind of legislation. I hope that legislation will come this year in many ways, and preventative measures. But this bill does not, we have to pass this, or you've given a carve-out, a continuing carve-out for traffickers of fentanyl. That's what we have now. This is the most deadly drug. We have to go after them equally with the heroin, but it's more deadly. And as to judicial discretion, we have minimums and maximums on almost, well, so many criminal laws I can't count them, and also on civil laws, how much you can do for attorney's fees. We give the judges limitations and maximums and minimums on laws all the time. I venture to say that every member of this body has voted for a mandatory minimum at some point on some law. For some reason, this drug is special, I guess. This is not just a drug offense. This is going after the drug traffickers. That's what it's focused on. That's who's going to get caught up, and that's who we want. As to traffickers locked up, well, cry me a river. There are so many victims of this and their families. That's who we're here to protect. And, you know, we'll give them good 3 squares a day in jail. So I hope you'll give me the green light on this bill.
Thank you. Is further debate on the motion? Hearing gentleman from 7.
I'll hurry so I don't get in trouble. I have 0 experience with fentanyl. I will probably never see it in my lifetime face to face. So I had to do some homework on this. I went to every one of my sheriffs. I went to personally talk to state police. This is a life and death thing for them just being on the job. they have to protect themselves by carrying, and forgive me, I can't remember the substance, that if they get an overdose, to save their own life, they have to have their fellow officers help them. I've heard in this debate that this is a good idea with a bad bill. I'm not qualified to answer that. If we're going to err on the side of this bill with a vote, let's err on the side that we are doing what our law enforcement that faces this every day and going to get worse with the problem on our southern border with more of those drugs pouring over. Let's err on the side of helping them with this tool. And in the future, we can fix the bill and make it better if need be. And so that's where I stand.
Thanks for the debate on the motion. Gentleman from 13.
Mr. Chair, to debate for the bill.
Has the floor. Debate the bill.
I would just like to state there's been a lot of things said today, and I don't want you to be confused. I certainly am not confused on this bill. If you are on the fence, not sure what to do, let not your hearts be troubled. I can help you with that. It's not a perfect bill. Perfect kills good. And this is a good bill. It gives the police the deterrent that we've been asking for. We've even had C.S. Lewis brought up. C.S. Lewis also talked about tyrants will oppress their people to the limit that the oppressed will essentially put up with. I'm done with being oppressed by the traffickers. Done being oppressed by those that manufacture the precursors, whether it be in China, wherever. The manufacturers in Mexico. This drug will kill you. But more importantly, it might kill your children, might kill your grandchildren. Not a big fan of DEI, as you know, but this one's all inclusive. This one doesn't care if you're rich or poor, first-time user, addict. We've even had testimony in committee where users were actually trafficking to support their habit. Well, understand, two truths can be the same at one time. They can be a user and a trafficker. So you're worried about the first-time users, catching those up. This drug is exponentially more dangerous than many of the others that we have on the mandatory minimums. That's why you've got the 4 grams limits. That's why you have what the limits are. But this is a deterrent. We put this on the mandatory minimums that so many of our police have asked for to give them something to fight back against this. I also mentioned, and I'm going to keep it short, again, when you talk about it being indiscriminate, I have no question that I am for this bill. I stated if I have a bad kid, I'd rather get collect calls for 5 years than if I have from the penitentiary, than if I have a good kid and I get 1 call from the coroner. This kills users, but it kills people indiscriminately. You don't have to be a user for this thing to kill you. We need to stop it. We need to give our law enforcement the tools to stop it. We need to send the message now that we are going to do something about it, and we're going to start today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further debate on the motion. Gentleman 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To speak on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman has the floor.
And I do promise to be brief.
Gentleman.
I've heard a lot of good stuff in here today, and I have to admit that I'm somebody who came up here today in a little bit different mood than I've come in last session or any time this session. I came not knowing which way I wanted to go because I know that this is a terrible thing that's happening all over the country, and yet I do see some of the weaknesses in this bill. One of the things that I'd like to speak about, no matter how you vote today, that I would like this body to consider has been spoke of briefly. All of this is coming across the southern border. Whether China is supplying the essential materials or not, I've heard that the cartels control the southern part of our own state, and that this is coming across with everyone who crosses the border. In the last 6 to 8 months, the population of Idaho has crossed the southern border of the United States. And until we have the desire to stop the people coming into Idaho that are bringing this terrible drug and others, I don't think that this bill or any other bill will slow it down. They'll sit at the border and pass it off to the little people, and they'll continue to bring it. So until we can stop our desire to allow the people who come to this country and this state illegally, I don't think we're going to get much done here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there further debate on the bill? Hearing none. Would the good gentleman from 11, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you. I rise to debate the bill.
Good gentleman, you open so you don't have the opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
I apologize. Further debate on the bill? Good lady from 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to share a few comments. This is an election year, and so it's been very difficult to really vote how you want to vote on this bill. We all want to stop fentanyl, which is a huge problem. But many of us know if we don't vote correctly with law enforcement on this bill, we will be law enforcement haters or fentanyl lovers or drug trafficker lovers, which is really a lot of pressure. Very unfortunate that gets put upon to us to pass a bill that way. That being said, I just wanted to share that I don't think this bill, it may give law enforcement some tools for the traffickers, and I think that's huge. We want our law enforcement to be able to address these traffickers. The fentanyl problem, we probably won't put a dent on it from what we learned in committee, but it will open the opportunity to come after some of these big traffickers. The problems that I see with the bill is all the unintended consequences of putting people in prison. The emotional strain on families, the grandparents that call me with their children in prison. Do they deserve to be punished? Yeah. Lifetime for something that was not intended? I don't know. It's a harsh punishment for a young person, but a lot of the people that deal in drugs are younger people. There are 18 to 30-year-olds. I just see a lot of issues with families and the struggles that they're going to go through, the consequences, the emotional strain. And I understand this is a difficult topic. I'm just torn on this bill. I'm torn on it. I want to do something, but I hate when we're told to vote out of fear, and we have to do something. I want to get it right. I think I'm assured that there's going to be some changes in the Senate to this bill, so I feel comfortable moving it forward, but I hate pushing something through that's not perfect, and we all own that. And I also hate for the Senate to do our work when we know that—
Mr. Speaker.
Lady from 8.
Point of order. We want to be real careful about impugning motives of anyone, and we're getting really close to that line.
Well, we'll try. Be careful, good lady. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure who I've impugned here. So I'm just talking reality of what's going on here with this legislation. There's a lot of reasons people do drugs, and I don't think until you're in those shoes you understand, or any of us would understand. But I will say it's destroying families across this country. And I don't know that throwing more people in prison is going to help that problem. I think it's a symptom of a bigger problem going on in our society. And we really need to dig deep on why all these people are drawn towards drugs. And so that's some of my thoughts on this legislation. I still am going back and forth. I'm not sure how exactly I'll vote. But I do think we do need to do something about the problems of fentanyl in this state.
Thank you, good lady. Is there further debate on the bill? Lady from 19.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't repeat the very eloquent arguments around the harms of mandatory minimums, but I do just want to underscore that this bill has murder charges for kids who pass out drugs at a party. And they have to know that they were passing out drugs, but they need not know what the drugs were laced with. And I think this is just a life sentence is not appropriate in that case, and that takes away a future from kids who were doing something that was a big mistake with a terrible consequence. But I don't think that's the road we want to go down. I want to talk about just also briefly deterrence. I think this just puts drug dealers further away from the transactions and makes the people who are profiting from the drug trade safer, while they use the drug users to make their deliveries and put them in front of these mandatory minimums. The other deterrence that I worry about is that when an overdose occurs, people are going to be thinking twice about calling that ambulance, because now we have murder charges in the mix. So this is just a dangerous road to go down. The whole point of this is to force judges to exact longer sentences than they would otherwise and create a new homicide charge that applies without intent to kill anyone at all. And I think the fiscal note does not account for what we're actually going to see happen to our prison costs, and I urge you to vote no.
For the debate on the motion, good lady from 9.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we don't want to kill imperfect bills, but we also need to pay attention to the language. The good gentleman from 30 went over a lot of things, and my main concern is making all the users, they're now traffickers. On page 1, if you look at 32 through 34, the detectable amount means you are a trafficker. Users are not usually traffickers. The one thing I'd like to mention before I sit down, I certainly do not appreciate the bottom of this. You're either for cops or you're for drug users and cartels. That is not correct for any single person in this body. I cannot think one person here supports drug cartels. I live right across the border from Oregon. My county is awash in this garbage. I am never in support of drugs. My own mother died of legal drug, of Oxycontin, that she was prescribed legally from a doctor, and it ended up killing her. I really don't think this is going to change anything at the border. It's not going to close the border. It's not going to stop these drugs from coming. I wish we could send this bill to the amending order and do the difference between a user and a real trafficker. Put the intent language in that the federal law has, fix the fiscal note, fix the emergency. Those things wouldn't kill the bill. It would make them a much better bill. So please, anyone that votes against this, do not look down on them. I certainly hope that law enforcement won't do to anyone who votes no what they did to me in the last election, that said I was against law enforcement because I didn't support ISP's budget for buying 4 houses for law enforcement, for ISP. I hope they will really find out who supports them and who doesn't. And my sheriffs know I support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. I'm going to make a motion to send House Bill 406 to the amending order.
I will second.
So there's a motion on the floor to send House Bill 406 to the amending order. We are open the floor for discussion on that motion. Would the good lady from 2 want to talk about her motion?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is in no means to kill this bill. We have to do something about fentanyl this year. I just want to make sure we send good language over to the Senate. And I don't want to be forced to do language that we might have a concern with. I can't imagine one person in this body that doesn't want to address fentanyl. It's just, and I have no problem with the mandatory minimums. And I want to make that clear. I will vote yes on better language, and so that's why I've made the motion.
Thank you, ladies. Further debate on the motion. Gentleman 15.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate.
Gentleman has the floor to debate motion.
Very quick, yeah, on the motion. Very quickly, perfect is the enemy of good, but better is the friend of good. Let's do better. I support the motion.
Further debate on the motion to send the bill to the amending order. Gentleman 10.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To oppose the motion.
Gentleman has the floor.
I strongly oppose this motion. We've been working on this for, I think, 4 or 5 years, simply to true up this bill of the most deadly substance we know out there in the illegal drug market. So I ask that you would red light this motion.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further debate on the motion. Hearing none. Good lady from 10 want to close on her motion. From 2, excuse me. Would the good lady from 2 want to close on her motion?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Question is, shall the House send House Bill 406 to general orders? The machine is not working, so the clerk will call the roll. Well, we could wait around while they try to fix it if you'd like to stay longer. Yeah, and please use your mic or speak loudly. The mics aren't very loud. I don't know if something's up, so you're going to have to yell pretty loud, please.
Alfieri? Yes. Allgood?
No.
Andrus?
Nay.
Barbieri?
Yes.
Birch? Yes. Blanksma? No. Boyle? Yes. Bundy?
No.
Burns? No, he's not here. Cannon? Cheatham?
No.
Chu or Wilson? Clow? Cornelis?
No.
Crane 12?
No.
Crane 13? No. Dixon 1? No. Dixon 24?
No.
Durant? No. Ehart?
Barb.
Good lady from 33, how do you vote?
Ehlers?
No.
Erickson?
No.
Furness?
No.
Galaviz? Gallagher? Gannon? Garner?
No.
Green? Handy?
No.
Hawkins? Healy?
No.
Hill?
No.
Holtzclaw?
No.
Horman? No. Kingsley?
Yes.
Lambert? No. Lanting? No. Manwaring? No. Matthias?
Yes.
McCann? No. Mendive? Yes. Mickelson? No. Miller? No. Mitchell? No. Monks?
Nay.
Moyle? No. Nash? Coberly? Yeah. Nekachea? Yes. Nelson?
No.
Palmer? No. Petsky? No. Pickett? No. Price? Yes. Raybold? No. Raymond,
No.
Redmond, Roberts, Rubel, Sauter,
No.
Scott,
Yes.
Shepherd, Skog, Tanner, Vanderwada, Weber,
No.
Wheeler, Wisniewski,
Yes.
Roten, Yamamoto,
No.
Young.
Sure on the last, because we had some absence. Roll call shows 19 ayes, 49 nays, 2 absent and excused. Less than a majority having voted in favor of the motion fails, and the House will continue to have under consideration House Bill 406. Was there a debate on the bill? Good lady from 33.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for a couple comments.
The lady wishes to debate the bill. The lady has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was one of them who sits on the Judiciary Committee, and we've dealt with this issue, mandatory minimums, for quite a few years now. And this is, as has already been said, very difficult. But there's a couple things that I want to point out, just so you know, because I think that some of the testimony would lead someone to believe something else. There are a couple of witnesses that were phenomenal. One of them you've heard, Sheriff Donahue. And what I liked about Sheriff Donahue is that he was willing to not just be one-sided on it. Because one of my concerns is this idea that by supporting this bill, fentanyl and the deaths are all going away. We solved the problem, they're not coming here. And Sheriff Donahue was very clear that's not the case. So we aren't solving the problem of the drugs not coming here. There's still going to be deaths, and we're still going to have to deal with this. But he feels like it is a tool. And the good Senate Chairman Lakey also said essentially that same thing. So I just think it's important because some of the comments and testimony, to me, would lead the person that's watching from the outside to believe that we're solving the problem and there'll be no more deaths. And the other consideration that I wish we had solved, just again being on the committee, as we all make our vote going forward, is we do have a problem of our youth being caught up unknowingly. And I'm just going to present to you the same problem I presented to the good sheriff and the good chairman. And that is, imagine your grandchild or your child being at a party. And at that party, before it gets to that time, they're in the halls and the one says, hey, do you still have your contact? And the other's like, yeah, I think I do. And will you check it out? And I don't have any money. And so you get like 10 people chipping in the money. And then they select friend C over here to go and get the drugs. And then they bring the drugs to the party. They're not drug users. They're not well versed in all this. They play around every now and then. They're 14, 15 years old. And then friend G dies. I asked, who is culpable? The answer, we don't know for sure, but they all could be culpable. So I'm just putting that out there so we recognize this is not an easy decision And it's important that we as this body understand that, because we are dealing with people's lives, even as lives are being lost. With that, I shall sit down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, good ladies. Further debate on the motion? Hearing none. Gentleman 14, care to close?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will say right now that the cartels and the dealers are looking at me right now. I have a pipper on my forehead because I'm trying to wreck their business. That's what this bill will do. It has deterrence. It gives the law enforcement what they need. Let's send the cartels and the drug dealers a signal. Idaho is strong. We're not going to let you come and affect us and scourge our families and our state. That's what this is going to do. We're going to send a strong signal. Hey, we're not putting up with this anymore. We're going to put you down. So what I'd like to send off to a good gentleman from number 11 to finish off.
Good gentleman from District 11 yield.
Good gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman has the opportunity to close the debate.
Thank you. I appreciate all the debate on this bill. It has been lengthy, and I apologize that we're missing lunch here. Idaho has had mandatory minimum since 1992, and Idaho has done a very good job. There has been lots of kind of temptation to consider the people that are in our prisons victims. There's been temptation to consider drug dealers victims, and from someone that spent a lifetime in law enforcement, I can assure you they are not victims. I have met with the victims many, many, many times, and I can show you who the real victims are. This bill is a very good bill, and it will support our fight against fentanyl in this state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Debate is closed. Question is, shall House Bill 406 pass the House? Clerk will lock the machine and the members will cast their votes. Has every member voted? Representative Holtzclaw. Does any member wish to change their vote? Clerk will lock the machine and record the roll. 55 ayes, 13 nays, 2 absent and excused, the majority having voted in favor of House Bill 406. House Bill 406 has passed House. Is there correction in title?
No correction to title.
Hearing none, the title is approved. Bill will be transmitted to the Senate. Good lady from 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the remaining bills on the third reading calendar hold their place for one legislative day.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there objection? Hearing none, the remaining bills on the third reading calendar hold their place one legislative day. And without objection, the House will now advance to 15th order of business announcements. The House is at the 15th order of business. Are there announcements? Good gentleman from 28.
Thank you, Speaker, for an announcement.
The gentleman has the floor.
I've been asked to remind this great body that the Shoshone-Bannock tribes has invited us all to a legislative reception tonight at 4:30 to 6 p.m. down at the Capital City Event Center, which is only a couple blocks from the State House here. Light refreshments and displays will be there, and if you have any questions, there'll be people there to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further announcements. Gentleman 29.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The majority will not caucus today, so listen for tomorrow or the next day, and I'll announce when we're going to get into caucus. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further announcements. Good lady from 18.
I believe the minority will caucus at 2:30.
Thank you, good lady. Further announcements? Hearing none, clerk may read.
House Business Committee will meet Monday, January 29th, 2 p.m., East Wing, Room 41, Clow Chairman. House Commerce and Human Resources Committee will not meet Monday, January 29th, East Wing, Room 5, Holtzclaw Chairman. House Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee will meet Monday, January 29th, 2 p.m., East Wing, Room 42, Skog Chairman. House Resources and Conservation Committee will meet Monday, January 29th, 1:30 p.m., East Wing, Room 3. Mendive Chairman. House Appropriations Committee will meet jointly with Senate Finance tomorrow, Tuesday, January 30th, 8 a.m., Room C310, Horman Chairman. House Education Committee will meet Tuesday, January 30th, 9 a.m., East Wing, Room 41, Yamamoto Chairman. House Health and Welfare Committee will meet Tuesday, January 30th, 9 a.m., East Wing, Room 20, Vanderwoude Chairman. House Revenue and Taxation Committee will meet Tuesday, January 30th, 9 a.m., East Wing, Room 42, Monks, Chairman. House State Affairs Committee will meet Tuesday, January 30th, 9 a.m., East Wing, Room 40, Crane 13, Chairman.
Thank you, good clerk. Are there further announcements? Good gentleman from 5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to change the time of the meeting for House Resources to 2 o'clock.
Thank you, gentlemen. House Resources move 2. Is further announcements? Hearing none. House advanced 16th order of business adjournment. House at 16th order of business. Good lady from 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Tuesday, January 30th, 2024.
Lady from 18.
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
Thank you, good lady. You've heard the motion of the House adjourn till Tuesday. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion passes. The House adjourned until 11 a.m. Tuesday, January 30th, 2024.